It was Christmas Eve in 1945, a night brimming with anticipation, holiday lights, and the promise of warmth and family. In a quiet corner of Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family household was alive with the chatter of 10 children and the scent of a Christmas tree dusted with tinsel. Little did they know, this joyful evening was about to spiral into one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in American history. 5 of those children would vanish without a trace by sunrise, and their disappearance remains an enigma that chills the soul to this day. Stay with me until the very end of this story, because the twists and turns will leave you questioning everything you think you know about the line between an accident and something far more sinister. Inside the Sodder home, decorations sparkled, and the younger kids buzzed with energy, giddy at the thought of finding surprises under the tree the next morning. Their mother, Jenny Sodder, eventually ushered the children to bed, but not before granting the older ones permission to stay up just a little longer. Meanwhile, George Sodder, the father, drifted off to sleep, content in the knowledge that the war was over and the world, at least for a moment, felt at peace. But fate, or perhaps something more nefarious, would soon intervene. Around midnight the telephone rang. A groggy Jenny answered, only to hear a strange woman's voice on the other end, asking for someone Jenny had never heard of. Raucous laughter and clinking glasses echoed in the background. Jenny politely told the caller they had the wrong number. In that moment, she thought nothing of it. As Jenny made her way back to bed, she realized something odd. The lights in the living room were still burning, and the curtains were left open. The door was unlocked too, tasks her older children were supposed to handle. Shrugging it off as a simple oversight, she tidied up, turned out the lights, and climbed the stairs, completely unaware that she and her family had slipped into a countdown to catastrophe. Jenny had barely shut her eyes when a sudden thud jolted her awake. It sounded like something hitting the roof, a dull impact followed by a rolling noise, and then a sharp bang. Moments later, an acrid smell pierced the cold night air. Jenny leaped up, and the sight greeting her was every parent's worst fear: flames flickering and spreading fast. She roused George and her children in a frenzy. Chaos erupted as smoke filled the halls. 4 of the kids managed to escape alongside George and Jenny, but 5 children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, remained trapped somewhere inside. George charged back into the inferno, only to be forced back by searing heat and thick smoke. Over and over he tried to break through, his lungs burning, heart pounding, screams echoing into the night. But it was impossible. In desperation, George ran to grab a ladder always kept against the side of the house. But it wasn't there. In a panic, he sprinted to the driveway, intending to drive his coal trucks right up to the house and climb atop them for a roof rescue. Inexplicably, neither truck would start, despite being in perfect working condition the previous day. Picture the scene. Flames engulfing the house, a father desperately turning an ignition key that refuses to budge, while neighbors and passers-by, stunned by the bizarre series of events, watch helplessly. The screams vanished into the roaring blaze. By the time the fire department arrived, the Sodder home was little more than a smoking husk. When dawn broke over the smoldering remains, the official stance was grim. 5 children were presumed dead. But there was a problem. No human remains were found in the ashes. No bones, no teeth, no trace that 5 lives had perished in that inferno. Authorities shrugged it off with one explanation. The flames had burned so hot that the children's bodies had been completely incinerated. End of story. But Jenny wasn't satisfied. Day after day, she conducted her own grim experiments, burning animal bones in her kitchen stove to see if they'd disintegrate to nothing. They never did. There was always some remnant of bone or a recognizable fragment. If her small stove couldn't destroy bones, How could a relatively brief house fire do it so completely? She then learned another unsettling fact. Their phone line that night wasn't destroyed by fire. It had been cut. Suspicion seeped in like the lingering smell of smoke. Neighbors reported seeing a stranger taking something from the Sodder property. Could someone have been deliberately sabotaging their efforts to rescue the children? George recalled a heated argument with a traveling insurance salesman, who, infuriated by George's outspoken criticism of the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, had shouted, "Your house will go up in smoke, and your children will be destroyed." Threat or coincidence? In the swirl of heartbreak and confusion, it was impossible to tell. But the Sodders began to suspect a horrifying possibility. Maybe their children hadn't died at all. Maybe they'd been kidnapped. The Sodders weren't alone in their doubts. In the chaotic weeks following the fire, alleged sightings of the missing children began to pour in. A driver passing by claimed to see figures of children peering from a car window on the road from Fayetteville, while the house was still engulfed in flames. A diner waitress swore she served breakfast to a group of kids matching the Sodder children's descriptions early the next morning. A hotel clerk in Charleston recalled a suspicious group: 2 men and 2 women with several children in tow. The kids were unusually quiet, as if instructed not to speak. These leads trickled in, all unconfirmed, but enough to fan the embers of hope. The Sodders plastered flyers everywhere, offered cash rewards, and even erected a huge billboard by the side of the highway, displaying the children's photos for decades to come, pleading for answers. Local authorities maintained a tight-lipped stance. There's no evidence of foul play. Investigations were half-hearted at best. The fire was ruled an accident, blamed on faulty wiring, despite George having had it inspected shortly before Christmas. To the Sodders, it felt like doors were slamming shut wherever they turned. George devoted his free time and all his finances to chasing down every lead. If someone wrote a letter claiming they knew where the children were, he'd drive across the country to speak with them, only to be met with dead ends, or worse, scammers trying to exploit the family's desperation. Jenny, overwhelmed by loss and suspicion, kept a silent vigil. She wore black mourning clothes every day for the rest of her life. Friends and neighbors whispered how she would stay up at night, staring out the window, convinced her children would return home if she just kept a light burning. Decades passed, and still no resolution. Then, in 1967, over 20 years after that fateful Christmas Eve, a shocking glimmer of hope arrived in the mail. Jenny opened an envelope with no return address, postmarked from Kentucky. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his mid-20s. On the back, a cryptic note read, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Illil boys." A 90132 or 35 Louis had been just 9 the night of the fire, but the eyes, the facial structure, there was a strong resemblance. The Sodders had never heard of a Frankie. Was it code? A clue? They hired a private investigator to track the sender, but the PI vanished without a trace, adding another layer of darkness to this already tragic saga. George Sodder died in 1969, never learning the truth. Jenny passed away in 1989, her heartbreak and unwavering conviction still intact. She refused to allow any memorial for her children, unwilling to declare them dead without proof. Their surviving children carried on the search in various ways, but as the years wore on, real answers never emerged. Eventually, the famous billboard that once stood as a silent beacon of their hope was taken down. The house was rebuilt. Time marched forward, leaving behind only echoes of that horrifying Christmas Eve, the memory of a phone ringing in the darkness, and the flicker of bright flames that swallowed 5 innocent lives, or perhaps spirited them away. What really happened to the Sodder children? Were they kidnapped in a carefully orchestrated plan against their politically outspoken father? Was there a darker motive lurking in the community's shadows, one that forced a cover-up? Or did tragedy simply strike in the cruelest way possible, leaving no trace of the children's remains? Despite countless theories, no one truly knows, and that is the cruelest twist of all. A family left in eternal limbo, trapped between hope and sorrow. Even with modern technology, breakthroughs remain scarce. The last direct leads have long gone cold, and the people who lived through the nightmare are mostly gone as well. In the realm of unsolved mysteries, the disappearance of the Sodder children stands as one of the most chilling, precisely because it began on what should have been the happiest night of the year. It's a story of a family torn apart by fire, of a mother's unyielding love, and a father's desperate search for truth. And it's a reminder that sometimes what we label an accident might hide an even more disturbing reality, lurking just beyond the flicker of the flames. Thank you for watching and sharing in this haunting journey with me. What do you believe happened on that freezing West Virginia night? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy delving into the darker corners of history, make sure to like and subscribe for more unsettling tales just like this one.